Jane Austen was a British novelist that is mostly known for her plays about love that criticized the British landed gentry, a historical British social class of landowners that existed at her time. She was born in Steventon, the 16th December 1775. She was the seventh child of George Austen and Cassandra Leigh. Jane was mostly educated at home for most of her childhood, but she attended boarding school at Reading and was also educated at Southampton. Pride and Prejudice is one of Jane's most known plays. It was published the 28th January 1813 as an anonymous play. It is one of the first romantic comedies in history of novels. The story tells about Mr. Bennet having five daughters with the only objective of marrying them. Charles Bingley arrives to the neighborhood, a wealthy single man that pretends to marry a woman. But the main character, Elizabeth, falls in love with Darcy, a friend of Bingley. The story tells about them having lots of pride and prejudice until falling in true love. Jane Austen didn't receive any prizes in her life. At that time, awards weren't given to women and they had to hide their identities. Nevertheless, she is one of the most important women in the English novel, with her irony and comedy of her plays.
Was George Eliot. George Eliot was the name used by Mary Ann Evans, who was an English novelist, poet, journalist, and translator. She was the third child of Robert and Christina Evans, a local millionaires. Evans' father invested in an education for his daughter, so she went to three different schools between her 5 and 16 years. Million the Flaws is a novel written by George Eliot. Published in 1860, the story centers on the life of Maggie Tulliver, an intelligent girl who lives in a small town in England in the 1830s. Maggie grows up in a family of millers and suffers the hate of her aunt and the conservative society. As Maggie grows older, she falls in love with a man her family does not approve and begins to question her role in society. With this novel, George Eliot criticizes the society of the moment, showing how this can limit freedom and rights. George Eliot did not win literary prizes in his time, as literary prizes as we know them today did not exist in the 19th century. However, George Eliot is considered one of the most important writers of 19th century of the English literature, and her work has been widely recognized and appreciated by literary critics and the public. Some of his most famous works, besides Mill on the Floss, Middlemarch, and Silas Marner.
Elizabeth Gaskell. Elizabeth Gaskell was born in London in 1810. She was the daughter of a shepherd called William Stevenson, and her mother was Eliza Horan. When her mother died, Elizabeth moved to Knaxford, where she lived with her aunt. In that village, she received her education, provided by her aunt. Her mother had contacts among the British high classes. They were not a rich family, but they were well accommodated. They had money. And her education was not a great one. She basically knew how to read and write. Now I'm going to talk about his most famous novel, Mary Burton. Mary Burton is one of the first and most well-known novels of Elizabeth Gaskell. In this book, which is inspired by Manchester, she tells us the difficulties of the worker class in the Victorian ages. This novel starts in Manchester and introduces us two worker class families, the Barton and the Wilson. John Barton starts by questioning the distribution of the richness and the relationships between rich and poor. His wife dies, so John Barton says that the fault of her death is the stress caused by the separation of her sister. John Barton falls into a depression that finished with him participating in the Carlist movement. Awards and achievements. Elizabeth Gaskell never won a literacy award, mainly because in that time there weren't any awards for women. But in her time, she was a very well-known writer, and as a matter of fact, nowadays is often mentioned in the BBC.